I'm Amber Mitchell, 27 years old, and I thought I knew what family meant. After working double shifts for months, I finally had the $5,000 for my sister Allison's college tuition. That morning, I practically skipped into the bursar's office, imagining how proud Mom would finally be. 5 hours later, I stood in our driveway, staring at trash bags filled with my belongings while rain soaked through my clothes. Mom's words still rang in my ears. Your job is done. Get out. If you've ever sacrificed everything for family only to be betrayed, let me know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe, and join me on this journey of heartbreak and healing. Growing up in Brookline, a middle-class neighborhood just outside Boston, our family looked normal from the outside. Our modest two-story colonial house, with its small front yard and slightly crooked mailbox, blended perfectly with every other home on Maple Street. But inside those walls, the dynamics were anything but ordinary. My father, James Mitchell, was a kind-hearted electrical engineer who preferred peace over confrontation. He'd come home from work, kiss my mother on the cheek, and retreat to his basement workshop where he'd tinker with broken appliances. Dad loved us, I never doubted that. But his constant yielding to my mother's authority created an unbalanced household that shaped my childhood. My mother, Catherine Mitchell, ruled our home with sharp words and calculated affection. She wasn't physically abusive, but her emotional manipulation was masterful. She worked as an office manager at a local dental practice, and somehow her organizational skills translated into controlling every aspect of our family life. The schedules on the refrigerator, the assigned chores, the approved friends, everything required her stamp of approval. Then there was my sister Allison, for years younger than me and undeniably the golden child. From her first dance recital at age 5, Mom decided Allison was destined for greatness. Her artwork claimed the prime real estate on the refrigerator. Her swim meet ribbons, even the participation ones, were framed and displayed in the living room. Her every achievement, no matter how small, warranted celebration. I, on the other hand, was the responsible one. My straight A's were expected, not celebrated. My academic achievements were acknowledged with quick nods and immediate questions about college applications or scholarship opportunities. I learned early that my value in the family was tied to what I could provide or accomplish. When I was 16, the carefully maintained facade of our family cracked wide open. Dad came home one day and announced he couldn't do it anymore. The fighting had become too much, the silences too long. The divorce wasn't messy. Dad wasn't the type to fight, but it left our family financially strained. Mom kept the house, but struggled with the mortgage payments on her salary alone. That's when I started working after school at the local supermarket, bagging groceries and gathering shopping carts from the parking lot. My paychecks didn't go toward movie tickets or new clothes like my friends. Instead, they were silently slipped into my mother's purse to help with utility bills and groceries. Allison, meanwhile, continued with her dance lessons and summer camps, her life largely unchanged by our new financial reality. After high school graduation, I made the difficult decision to delay college. While my friends packed up their dorm supplies and headed off to universities, I moved from part-time to full-time at the supermarket and added evening shifts at a local diner. The plan was to work for a year, save up, then start community college. 1 year turned into 2, then 3. By 23, I had finally worked my way into an entry-level position at a local accounting firm, taking night classes to earn my associate's degree. By 26, I had received my first real promotion and was finally earning enough to start saving for my own place. Last year, after 7 years of renting with roommates, I made what seemed like a responsible decision at the time. Mom mentioned that the property taxes had increased again, and she was struggling to keep up with the house payments. Since I was saving for a down payment on my own place anyway, I offered to move back home temporarily, paying rent to help her while increasing my savings without roommate complications. My relationship with Allison had evolved as we grew older. The childhood resentment had faded into a complicated but loving bond. She was studying psychology at Boston University, living in the dorms, and came home mainly on holidays. When she did, we'd stay up late watching bad reality TV shows and sharing stories about our separate lives. During these moments, away from Mom's influence, I could see glimpses of the person she was becoming, compassionate, funny, and occasionally even admiring of my independence. 3 weeks ago, during one of our rare sister lunches, Allison mentioned she was thinking of dropping out of college. With only 3 semesters left until graduation, she explained that tuition had increased, and Mom couldn't cover it anymore. She was casual about it, saying maybe she'd try again in a few years when she had saved up, but I could see the disappointment behind her practiced nonchalance. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my own abandoned college dreams and how I'd finally found stability despite the detours. The thought of Allison facing the same struggles made my chest tight. By morning, I had made up my mind. I would use part of my house down payment to cover her remaining tuition. $5,000 would delay my plans by about 8 months, but it seemed worth it to keep Allison's future on track. The decision to use my house down payment for Allison's tuition wasn't made lightly. I spent 3 days reviewing my budget spreadsheets, calculating how this would affect my 5-year plan. Each time I ran the numbers, the same conclusions stared back at me from my laptop screen. I could do this, but it would mean another winter in my childhood bedroom. Another year of living under Catherine's roof and rules. Was it worth it? The question followed me through restless nights and distracted workdays. Finally, I called my financial advisor, who cautioned against it but acknowledged it was technically feasible. "Just make sure this is appreciated," she said before hanging up. Those words would come back to haunt me later. The morning I went to withdraw the money was unseasonably cold for April in Massachusetts. I remember shivering in my thin blazer as I waited for the bank to open, watching my breath form small clouds in the air. The weight of my decision pressed on my chest, making each breath shallow. "Are you sure about this withdrawal amount?" the teller asked, peering at me over her glasses. For a split second, doubt crashed over me. $5,000. Almost 2 years of careful saving. The difference between freedom this year or next. "Yes," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Family emergency. The check felt impossibly light in my hand as I drove to Boston University's administration building. I held it carefully, as if it might dissolve if I gripped it too tightly. The bursar barely looked up as I explained I was paying my sister's outstanding tuition balance. To him, it was just another transaction. To me, it was a sacrifice, an investment, a gesture that would surely, finally, prove my worth to my family. With the receipt safely tucked in my purse, I called my best friend Rachel from the parking lot. "You did what?" Her voice rose in disbelief. "Amber, tell me you at least told them beforehand. Please tell me they know what you're giving up for this." I wanted it to be a surprise, I explained, feeling a flicker of defensiveness. "Besides, it's worth it for Allison's future." Rachel's sigh crackled through the car speakers. "I just hope they appreciate what this means." "That's your house fund, Amber. Your escape plan." "It's fine," I assured her, though something in her tone made my stomach tighten. "I'm heading home now to tell them. I'll call you later with all the details of their tearful gratitude." We both laughed, but mine felt forced. On the way home, I stopped at a small bakery and bought a chocolate cake, Allison's favorite, and a bottle of sparkling cider to celebrate. I even picked up a small potted orchid for Mom, remembering how she'd mentioned wanting one for her office. As I drove, memories surfaced of other times I'd sought my mother's approval. The time I made dinner for a week when she had the flu, only to have her critique the overcooked pasta. The straight-A report cards that were met with as expected rather than celebration. The promotion at work that she dismissed as just bookkeeping. Would this grand gesture finally be enough? At a red light, I texted Allison, "Heading home with a surprise for you. You around?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Finally. Out with friends. Back later. Disappointment settled in my chest, but I pushed it aside. I'd still see Mom, and we could celebrate properly when Allison returned. As I turned onto our street, I noticed something odd. Mom's silver Honda Civic was in the driveway, but Allison's beat-up Corolla was nowhere to be seen. Strange, since her text implied she'd left from home. More curious was the open garage door. Mom was meticulous about keeping it closed. I pulled in behind Mom's car, gathering the cake and flowers from the passenger seat. Something felt off. A subtle wrongness that raised the hair on my arms despite the afternoon warmth. The house looked the same as always, white siding, navy shutters. The slightly crooked brass number 54 by the door, but an unfamiliar silence hung around it. Usually, I could hear Mom's talk radio shows or Allison's music from the driveway. Today, nothing disturbed the quiet April afternoon except the distant sound of a lawnmower from somewhere down the block. With the cake balanced precariously in one hand and the orchid in the other, I made my way to the front door, each step feeling heavier than the last. I shouldered open the front door, calling out a cheerful hello that echoed through the unusually silent house. The familiar scent of Mom's cinnamon air fresheners mixed with something else, cardboard and packing tape. Moving smells. Mom? You home? I set the cake and orchid on the entryway table and slipped off my shoes, noticing a stack of flattened boxes leaning against the wall. No answer came from the kitchen or living room. I headed upstairs, assuming Mom might be napping or on the phone in her bedroom. That's when I noticed my bedroom door standing open. My door was always closed. Always. Even when I wasn't home. I kept it shut, one of the few boundaries Mom respected. Seeing it wide open sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. I approached slowly, as if the open doorway might contain something dangerous. In a way, it did. My room was empty. Not just tidied or rearranged, empty. The twin bed where I'd been sleeping for the past year was stripped down to the bare mattress. My dresser drawers hung open, cleared of clothes. The desk where I'd paid bills and studied for my accounting certification was bare. No laptop, no papers, no framed photo of Rachel and me at her wedding. For several seconds, I couldn't process what I was seeing. Had we been robbed? Had there been a fire I somehow hadn't heard about? My mind scrambled for rational explanations while my body remained frozen in the doorway. Then I noticed the closet, door ajar, clothing rail empty except for a few wire hangers swinging slightly in the draft from the hallway. Mom? My voice came out higher than usual, panic edging into the single syllable. In the kitchen. Her reply was calm, almost bored. I thundered down the stairs, nearly tripping in my haste. The kitchen was immaculate as always, afternoon sun streaming through the spotless windows. Mom sat at the table, scrolling through her phone, a cup of tea steaming beside her. What happened to my room? I demanded, breathless. Where's all my stuff? She looked up, her expression neutral. In the garage. I packed it for you. You? What? Why would you do that? Mom set her phone down with deliberate slowness. Because it's time for you to go, Amber. Your job is done. The words hit me like a physical blow. My job? What are you talking about? Allison called. Said you paid her tuition. She sipped her tea, watching me over the rim of the cup. That was the agreement. Agreement? What agreement? I never agreed to anything. My voice rose with each question. Confusion giving way to the first sparks of anger. Not with you. Mom waved her hand dismissively. James and I agreed when we divorced that I'd keep Allison through college. And he'd take you afterward. But then he moved to Florida with that woman, so? She shrugged. I've done my part. 19 years with you, plus the extra time you've been back. The tuition payment was the last thing we needed. Now you can go. The kitchen seemed to tilt around me, the familiar yellow walls and white cabinets suddenly alien and hostile. This was a nightmare. It had to be. You can't be serious, I whispered. This is my home. No. Mom's voice hardened. This is my home, which I've generously shared with you while you got on your feet. Now that you have the means to help Allison, your usefulness here is done. Usefulness. I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. I'm your daughter, not an employee you can fire. Don't be dramatic, Amber. You're 27, for God's sake. Most people your age don't live with their mothers. I moved back to help you with the mortgage. Anger flared hot and bright now. I've been paying rent. I've been buying groceries. And now you've paid Allison's tuition. she countered calmly. The final installment on your family obligations. My mind raced, trying to make sense of this surreal conversation. Does Allison know about this? Something flashed across Mom's face. Guilt? Annoyance? It disappeared too quickly to identify. Allison understands family duty better than you ever did. And suddenly, everything clicked into terrible focus. The convenient timing of Allison's tuition crisis. Her vague text about being out with friends. The carefully packed boxes. She knew, I said flatly. You both planned this. Mom didn't deny it. She merely reached for her phone again, as if this conversation was growing tedious. You used me. My voice shook with rage and betrayal. Both of you. You manipulated me into giving up my savings, and now you're throwing me out. Don't make this ugly, Amber. Your things are packed. I even called a storage facility that has space available if your new place isn't ready yet. New place? I laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. What new place? My down payment is gone. I have nowhere to go. That's hardly my problem. You're an adult. Figure it out. She stood up, carrying her teacup to the sink. I expect you to be out by evening. I have a book club meeting at 7. Something in me snapped. Years of being the good daughter, the responsible one. The reliable Amber who always came through, it all combusted in a single moment of white-hot fury. You can't do this to me. I shouted, slamming my hand on the counter. I gave up everything for this family. My college education, my savings, years of my life. Mom turned, her eyes cold. No one asked you to be a martyr, Amber. Your choices were your own. Because I thought that's what family does. They support each other. And now it's time for you to support yourself. She moved toward the hallway. Your boxes are in the garage. Please don't leave anything behind. As she brushed past me, something inside me crumpled. Mom, please, I whispered, hating the pleading note in my voice, but unable to stop it. Don't do this. She paused at the doorway, and for a brief, hopeful moment, I thought I'd reached her. Then she picked up the orchid I'd brought, the pink flowers still bright with promise, and examined it with mild interest. Thoughtful, but I prefer white orchids. You should know that by now. She set it down and looked at me with something like pity. You never did quite fit, did you, Amber? Always trying too hard. The casual cruelty of her words stole my breath. Before I could respond, she added, I'll be upstairs. Lock the door when you leave. As she turned to go, I grabbed the cake box from the entryway table. What about this? Another thoughtful mistake. Allison's watching her wait for summer, Mom replied without turning around. Something in me broke completely. I hurled the cake box at the wall beside her. It missed, hitting a framed family photo instead. Glass shattered, showering the hardwood floor with glittering shards. Mom whirled around, her face contorted with a rage that matched my own. She grabbed a water glass from the counter and threw it directly at me. I ducked, and it exploded against the refrigerator behind me, sending glass fragments into my hair and across my shoulders. Get out, she screamed, her composure finally cracking. Get out now before I call the police. Shaking, I pulled out my phone and called Allison. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. She blocked your number this morning, Mom said, her voice eerily calm again. She didn't want to deal with the drama. I stood in the kitchen of my childhood home, surrounded by broken glass and betrayal, understanding with crystal clarity that I had never really had a family at all, just people who used me until I had nothing left to give. In a daze, I walked to the garage. True to her word, Mom had packed my life into garbage bags and cardboard boxes, some labeled clothes or books, others simply Amber stuff. The clinical organization of it made the betrayal even more painful. This hadn't been a snap decision. They had planned this methodically, waiting until I'd handed over my savings before springing their trap. As I loaded my car in the pouring rain that had started while we argued, garbage bags splitting and spilling clothes onto the wet driveway, I called Allison one more time from a different phone. Again, straight to voicemail. I left a message, my voice breaking. I hope it was worth it. I hope $5,000 was a fair price for a sister. With my car packed so full I could barely see out the back window. I drove away from the only home I'd ever known, with no destination in mind and no plan beyond surviving the night. The first few hours after leaving my mother's house remain a blur in my memory. I remember driving aimlessly through increasingly heavy rain, windshield wipers struggling to keep pace with my tears. At some point, I pulled into a Walmart parking lot and sat there, engine running, watching shoppers dash through puddles with their carts. My phone buzzed. Rachel. Hey, did you tell them? How'd it go? Her cheerful voice made my throat close up. When I didn't immediately answer, her tone changed. Amber? What happened? They kicked me out, I finally managed, the words releasing a fresh wave of tears. They took my money and kicked me out. What? Who kicked you out? Your mom. Both of them. They planned it. Rachel, all my stuff is in my car and I have nowhere to go. The silence on the other end lasted only seconds, but felt eternal. Then, decisively, come here. Now. I'm texting you our new address. Brad's making up the guest room. An hour later. I sat wrapped in a borrowed bathrobe at Rachel's dining table, hands clutched around a mug of tea I couldn't bring myself to drink. I'd recounted the whole horrible scene, still unable to fully believe it had happened. I can't believe Allison was in on it, Rachel said, shaking her head. That's evil, Amber. I keep thinking I missed something. That there's some explanation that would make this make sense. I stared into the untouched tea. But there isn't, is there? They just used me. All these years. Rachel reached across the table and gripped my hand. You can stay here as long as you need. The guest room is yours. But I couldn't. Rachel and Brad had been married less than a year. Their apartment was tiny, barely big enough for 2 people, let alone a third. Besides, I couldn't bear the thought of being a charity case, dependent on someone else's goodwill again. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I couldn't face explaining my situation to colleagues, couldn't bear the pitying looks. Instead, I spent the day on Rachel's laptop, searching for affordable housing options while she was at work. The financial reality was grim. Without my savings, I could afford very little in Boston's expensive rental market. Every studio apartment required first and last month's rent plus security deposit, money I no longer had. Extended stay hotels were equally out of reach. By evening, desperation had set in. I expanded my search to outer suburbs, looking at rooms for rent in shared houses, anything to get a roof over my head before I overstayed my welcome at Rachel's. Finally, 3 days and 12 viewings later, I found it, a converted utility room in a basement apartment in Somerville. The bedroom had no windows and barely fit a twin mattress and small dresser. But it was $200 cheaper than anything else I'd seen. The landlord, an elderly man named Mr. Petrosky, seemed more concerned with whether I was quiet and paid on time than with my sudden housing emergency. No parties, no overnight guests without approval, no cooking smelly foods, he listed off, handing me a key after I signed the hastily printed lease. Rent due first of month. Late fee is $25 per day. I moved in that evening. Rachel and Brad helping me carry the few boxes I'd unpacked at their place. The rest would have to stay in my car until I figured out a more permanent solution. That first night alone in my new home, a basement room with concrete walls that smelled faintly of laundry detergent and mold, I finally allowed myself to fall apart completely. I sobbed into a pillow to muffle the sound, grieving not just for my lost savings, but for the family I'd thought I had, the love I'd spent a lifetime trying to earn. The next morning, my phone showed 3 missed calls from an unknown number. No voicemails. I suspected it was Allison and blocked the number without hesitation. I wasn't ready to hear whatever justification she'd concocted. The weekend passed in a fog of practical tasks, setting up mail forwarding, notifying my bank of my new address, buying the essentials I needed that were buried somewhere in the boxes still in my car. I found a storage unit I could afford if I cut back on groceries, and spent Sunday afternoon unloading my car into the small concrete space that now held most of my possessions. Monday morning, I returned to work with a carefully constructed story about a sudden apartment flooding that had forced me to move quickly. My boss, Linda, seemed suspicious but didn't press for details. Days turned into weeks. I established new routines in my basement dwelling, showering at the gym before work to avoid the temperamental bathroom I shared with two other tenants. Preparing simple meals on a hot plate since kitchen access was limited to specific hours. I found a therapist, Dr. Thompson, who offered sliding scale payments and didn't flinch when I broke down describing my mother's cold dismissal. What you experienced was parental abandonment, she explained during our third session, combined with financial exploitation. Your feelings of betrayal and grief are completely valid. But why? I asked. The question that had haunted me since that rainy afternoon. Why would they do this? I was helping them. Some people view relationships transactionally, she said gently. Your value to them was what you could provide, not who you are. That says everything about them and nothing about your worth. Slowly, painfully, I began rebuilding. I received a text from Allison a month after I left. Mom said you chose to leave. Is that true? Which I left unanswered. I blocked my mother's number after she called at midnight, leaving a rambling voicemail about some insurance paperwork she needed me to handle. Rachel became my lifeline, inviting me for dinner twice weekly, helping me find affordable furniture for my tiny room. Her parents even sent me a care package, homemade cookies, gift cards for groceries, and a handwritten note telling me I was always welcome in their home for holidays. I began reconnecting with old friends my mother had subtly pushed away over the years. Jessica from high school, who now taught kindergarten in Cambridge. Michael from my community college days, currently managing a bookstore downtown. People who remembered me as funny, smart, kind, qualities my family had never seemed to notice. My neighbor Marcus, a night shift nurse who lived across the hall, became an unexpected ally. We bonded over our equally dismal housing situations and shared love of terrible sci-fi movies. He introduced me to his friend group, and suddenly my social calendar wasn't just empty spaces between therapy appointments. The tiny basement room slowly became something like home. I hung string lights around the perimeter of the ceiling to compensate for the lack of windows. I splurged on good sheets and a plush comforter. Small touches, a potted succulent, framed photos of new memories with new friends, a colorful rug, transformed the space from desperate last resort to intentional sanctuary. 3 months after what I now referred to as the eviction, I received my first letter from Allison. Not a text or email, but an actual envelope with a Boston University return address. Inside was a note written on lined paper. I need $200 for textbooks. Mom said you wouldn't help because you're selfish, but I thought I'd ask anyway. My Venmo is. I crumpled it up without reading further and threw it away. The next day, I blocked her on all social media platforms and deleted her contact information from my phone. The finality of it hurt, but also brought a strange sense of relief. One less avenue for manipulation. One less way to be hurt. That weekend, Linda called me into her office at the accounting firm. I braced for bad news. Layoffs had been rumored for weeks. Instead, she offered me an opportunity. The firm would pay for additional certification courses if I committed to staying with them for 2 years afterward. The promotion would mean a significant salary increase. You've shown exceptional commitment during a clearly difficult personal time, she said, sliding the paperwork across her desk. We value that kind of resilience. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. The certification courses would mean night classes for 6 months, but the career advancement would put me back on track toward financial stability. As summer faded into fall, I enrolled in the certification program, spending evenings in fluorescent-lit classrooms after full workdays. Exhausting, but purposeful. I started setting aside small amounts each paycheck toward a new emergency fund. $20 here, $30 there, rebuilding my safety net one modest deposit at a time. The first holiday season alone loomed as a difficult milestone. Rachel immediately insisted I join her family for Thanksgiving, and Marcus invited me to his friend's orphan Christmas, gathering for those unable to travel home. Surrounded by these chosen connections, I began to understand that family could be something you build, not just something you're born into. By December, almost 4 months after leaving my mother's house, I had begun to establish a life that felt authentically mine. Not perfect, my living situation was still far from ideal, and financial recovery would take years, but mine. Built on my terms. Filled with people who valued me for reasons beyond what I could provide them. Then my father called. "Is this still Amber's number?" The hesitant male voice took me a moment to recognize. "Dad?" I nearly dropped my phone in surprise. We hadn't spoken in over 6 months, just occasional text messages on birthdays and holidays. "Amber, thank God." Relief flooded his voice. "I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Your mother won't tell me where you are, and Allison keeps giving me different stories." I sat down on my bed, heart pounding. "I don't live with Mom anymore. We had a falling out." I gathered that much. "What happened?" "Catherine keeps saying you abandoned them, but that doesn't sound like you." The genuine concern in his voice broke something loose inside me. Words poured out. The tuition payment, the packed boxes, the glass thrown at my head, the months of struggling to rebuild. By the time I finished, I was crying and the line had gone silent. "Dad? Are you there?" "I'm here." His voice sounded strange, thick with emotion. "Amber, I had no idea." "I'm so sorry." "It's not your fault," I said automatically, the peacemaker role still ingrained after all these years. "No, it is. At least partly." He sighed heavily. "I should have protected you better. I never should have left you with her. I couldn't take her anymore, and I thought you were old enough to handle yourself." The admission stunned me. In all the years since the divorce, my father had never acknowledged any regret or responsibility. "Why are you calling now?" I asked, suddenly suspicious. "Do you need something too?" "No, honey. I'm calling because I need to warn you. Catherine's been hiding my mail for months. Medical bills, insurance notices. I only found out when the hospital called about my overdue balance." "Hospital? What happened?" "Diabetic emergency. I collapsed at work last month. That's why I've been trying to reach you. I thought you might still be at the house and could check on things." Concern pushed aside my lingering resentment. "Are you okay now?" "Managing. But there's more you should know. The house is in foreclosure, Amber. Catherine stopped making payments 6 months ago, despite the money you were giving her." My mind reeled. "But that's impossible. I've been paying rent directly to her every month until I left." "Where did the money go?" "I've been sending child support for Allison too, even though she's technically an adult." A sick feeling settled in my stomach. "Allison dropped out of college right after I paid her tuition." "What?" Now it was Dad's turn to sound shocked. "But Catherine said she was still attending." We pieced it together over the next hour. Mom had been taking money from both of us, plus my rent payments, but the mortgage hadn't been paid in months. The tuition I'd sacrificed my savings for had likely been refunded since Allison withdrew from classes shortly after I made the payment. "I think your mother might have a gambling problem," Dad finally said. There were signs before we split up. Small amounts missing, unexplained cash withdrawals. I confronted her once, and she got so defensive I never brought it up again. The revelation should have made me angry, but instead, I felt a strange calm. The puzzle pieces finally fit. The constant financial crises, the erratic behavior, the impossible expectations, all of it made a terrible kind of sense. "Dad, I can't get involved in this. I'm sorry about your health, but I'm just starting to get on my feet again." "I understand." His voice held no judgment. "I'm not asking you to fix anything. I just thought you deserved to know the truth." And he hesitated. "I wanted to say I'm proud of you, Amber. For surviving this. For building your own life despite everything." After we hung up, I sat in my tiny room for a long time, processing. The conversation had shifted something fundamental in my understanding of the past. I hadn't been crazy or deficient or unlovable. I'd been caught in the undertow of my mother's illness and my father's absence. That night, I wrote everything down, all the memories, patterns, and red flags I'd normalized over the years. It was painful but clarifying, like lancing an infected wound. When I finally fell asleep near dawn, it was with a lighter heart than I'd had in months. The next day, I did something I'd been putting off since moving. I called my student loan provider and inquired about returning to school part-time to finish my bachelor's degree. With my promotion on the horizon, I could manage one class per semester. Spring enrollment closes next Friday, the advisor informed me. You'd need to complete your application by then. I took a deep breath. I'll have it in by Wednesday. Over the next few days, I received a flurry of increasingly frantic texts from Allison. Dad had apparently told her about our conversation. Mom says you're lying about everything. Dad's making a big deal out of nothing. You need to call Mom and apologize. I didn't respond to any of them. But I didn't block her number either. Something told me to wait. Sure enough, a different message came 3 days later. Can we talk? Not about Mom. Just us. We met at a coffee shop near my office. Neutral territory. Allison looked thinner than I remembered, dark circles under her eyes. She fidgeted with her cupped sleeve, avoiding my gaze. I didn't know she was going to throw you out, she finally said. I knew she wanted you to move out eventually, but not like that. Not the same day. But you knew about the tuition. I said, keeping my voice level. You knew I was using my savings for classes you'd already dropped. She flinched. Mom said you owed us. That you'd been living rent-free and needed to contribute. I paid rent every month, Allison. I have the bank records to prove it. Her eyes widened slightly, genuine surprise. She told me you were staying for free. That you were taking advantage. And you believed her? Without ever asking me. She stared into her untouched coffee. She's really good at making things sound reasonable in the moment. We talked for almost 2 hours. Allison had her own stories, the manipulation, the impossible standards, the subtle triangulation that had kept us at odds throughout childhood. She dropped out of college not because of tuition issues, but because of debilitating anxiety that made attending classes nearly impossible. Mom refused to let me see a therapist, she explained. Said it would look bad on her insurance through work. So I just stopped going to class. Then used the tuition as an excuse when she got the failure notices. By the time we parted, I didn't feel ready to forgive, but I understood better. Allison had been as much a victim of our mother's dysfunction as I had been, just in different ways. We agreed to keep minimal contact, checking in via text occasionally, but maintaining our separate journeys of recovery. Christmas arrived, my first without family. I spent Christmas Eve at Marcus's apartment, watching holiday movies with his friends. When he walked me back to my room, he hesitated at my door. I got you something, he said, handing me a small package wrapped in newspaper comics. Inside was a keychain with a tiny succulent charm, a reference to the collection of small plants I'd accumulated in my windowless room. Because you can thrive anywhere, he explained with a shy smile. Even with minimal light and not much to work with. I hugged him impulsively, and for the first time in months, felt the flutter of possibility. Not just survival, but a life with joy and connection. A future worth building toward. As January brought a new year, I received my first promotion notification. The certification courses were paying off already. I started looking at one-bedroom apartments in safer neighborhoods, making lists of requirements and budget limits. No more basements, I decided. My next home would have windows, lots of them. The rebuilding continued, one careful step at a time. Therapy with Dr. Thompson helped me recognize and dismantle the unhealthy patterns I'd internalized. Friends provided the community I'd never had growing up. Work offered structure and purpose. A place where my contributions were actually valued. One evening in late January, as I was studying for my certification exam, my phone rang with my father's number. The foreclosure is moving forward, he said without preamble. Catherine's asking for my help, but I can't bail her out this time. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. Despite everything. The thought of my childhood home being lost brought a pang of sadness. There's more, he continued. I've been diagnosed with stage 2 diabetes. The doctors want me to move somewhere with better medical facilities than this retirement community. I waited, sensing what was coming next. I know it's a lot to ask, but I need help navigating this, Amber. Catherine's a mess. Allison isn't answering my calls, and I don't know who else to turn to. 6 months ago, I would have dropped everything to rescue him. Now, I took a moment to consider what I could realistically offer without derailing my own recovery. I can help you research facilities, I said carefully. And maybe talk to Allison. But I can't get directly involved with Mom or the house situation. That's more than I deserve, he said quietly. Thank you. As I hung up, I realized something had fundamentally changed. For the first time, I'd set a boundary with family that prioritized my own well-being. Not out of anger or retaliation, but from a place of healthy self-preservation. 6 months after being thrown out with nothing but garbage bags of possessions, I had built more than just a new living situation. I'd constructed a new understanding of family, one based on mutual respect and genuine care rather than obligation and use. The journey wasn't over. Financial recovery would take years. Trust issues remained a work in progress. But standing in my tiny room, surrounded by the life I'd cobbled together from scraps of opportunity and resilience, I knew with certainty that I would not just survive this chapter. I would emerge from it stronger, wiser, and, finally, genuinely free. The first truly warm day of spring found me in a small cafe near the accounting firm, having lunch with Marcus. Over the past month, our friendship had gradually shifted into something more: tentative dates, long conversations, the cautious exploration of mutual feelings. Today, he'd surprised me by showing up at my office with takeout sandwiches and an invitation to eat in the nearby park. You look different, he observed as we claimed a bench beneath a flowering dogwood tree. Different how? I unwrapped my sandwich, enjoying the simple pleasure of sunshine after months of Boston winter. Lighter. Like you're not carrying the world on your shoulders anymore. I considered this. I think I finally stopped waiting for permission to be happy. He smiled, reaching for my hand. That's what I like about you, Amber. You've been through hell, but you're still so. My phone rang, interrupting whatever he was about to say. Dad's number flashed on the screen. Sorry. I should take this. My father hasn't been well. I answered, expecting our now regular check-in about his medical appointments. Instead, I heard panicked breathing. Amber? Thank God. I need help. It's an emergency. I straightened, immediately alert. What happened? Are you okay? I'm at Massachusetts General. His voice sounded weak, frighteningly so. Diabetic ketoacidosis. They flew me in from Florida yesterday. What? Why didn't you call me sooner? I tried, but my phone was in my luggage. The nurse just brought it. He paused, his breathing labored. Amber, I need you to go to the house. Catherine isn't answering her phone, and I'm worried something's happened. Every instinct screamed to refuse, to maintain the careful boundaries I'd established. But the genuine fear in his voice made refusal impossible. I'll check on her, I promised. Text me your doctor's name so I can call for updates. After explaining the situation to a concerned Marcus, I headed to my childhood home for the first time in 6 months. The drive felt surreal, familiar streets and landmarks that now belonged to a different life, a different Amber. As I approached Maple Street, my stomach tightened. The neighborhood looked the same: neat lawns, children's bicycles in driveways, recycling bins awaiting collection. But our house stood out immediately, and not in a good way. The lawn had grown wild, nearly knee-high in places. Newspapers piled on the porch, yellowed with age and rain. The silver Honda still sat in the driveway, but one of its tires was flat. And pollen coated the windshield in a thick yellow film. I parked behind it and approached the front door with mounting dread. The brass numbers, 54, had come loose on one side, hanging at an odd angle. I rang the doorbell. No answer. Knocked loudly. Nothing. After the third attempt, I retrieved the spare key from its hiding place in the fake rock by the rhododendron bush. It was still there, untouched for who knows how long. The smell hit me first when I opened the door. Stale air and something worse, something rotten. Mail covered the entryway floor, cascading from the overflowing table where we'd always left it. Bills, many marked final notice or urgent. Mom? I called, stepping carefully over the paper obstacle course. It's Amber. Are you home? The living room was in disarray. Empty food containers, unwashed glasses, blankets piled on the couch as if someone had been sleeping there. The kitchen was worse. Dishes stacked precariously in the sink, garbage overflowing, fruit flies circling a bowl of what might once have been apples. Upstairs, I found my mother's bedroom door closed. I knocked, then slowly opened it when no response came. Catherine Mitchell lay in bed, awake but seemingly unaware of my presence. Her hair, once meticulously colored and styled every 6 weeks, had grown out gray at the roots. Her normally immaculate nails were bitten to the quick. Most alarming was her vacant expression as she stared at the ceiling. "Mom?" I approached cautiously. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes flickered toward me, then away. "They're taking the house," she mumbled. "Coming tomorrow." "Who's coming tomorrow?" "The bank people." "Sheriff." "Eviction." She waved a hand weakly toward the nightstand, where a formal-looking document lay. I picked it up, a final eviction notice following foreclosure, dated for tomorrow at 9 a.m. "How long have you known about this?" I asked, scanning the document with growing alarm. "Months." "Doesn't matter now." She rolled away from me, pulling blankets over her shoulder. "Nothing matters." I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to shake her. "When did you last eat? Or shower?" No response. I retreated to the hallway and called Allison, who answered on the first ring. "Have you been to the house recently?" I demanded without preamble. 3 weeks ago. Mom wouldn't let me in. Said she was reorganizing and didn't want help. Allison's voice tightened. "Why? What's happening?" I explained the situation. Dad's hospitalization, Mom's condition. The impending eviction. "Oh my God," Allison whispered. I knew things were bad, but not this bad. "I've been so focused on my own problems." "Can you come?" "Now? I can't handle this alone." The admission cost me, but pride seemed irrelevant in the face of this crisis. "I'll be there in 40 minutes. While waiting for Allison, I called Dad's doctor for an update, stable but serious, then began addressing the most immediate problems. I coaxed Mom into eating some toast and taking a brief shower. I collected the scattered mail, sorting it into urgent and non-urgent piles. I called the bank and sheriff's office, explaining the medical emergency and requesting a brief extension on the eviction. "The foreclosure process has been ongoing for 9 months, ma'am," the bank representative explained unsympathetically. "Multiple notices were sent." "My mother is clearly experiencing a mental health crisis," I argued. "We need a few days to make arrangements." After being transferred to 3 different departments, I secured a 72-hour delay, barely enough time, but better than nothing. Allison arrived as promised, her shock at the house's condition matching my own. After a tearful reunion, 6 months of separation crumbling in the face of shared crisis, we divided responsibilities. She would stay with Mom and start packing essentials, while I met with the family lawyer to understand our options. Arthur Goldstein had handled my parents' divorce and had known our family for years. His downtown office was a haven of calm confidence amid the chaos of the day. "This has been a long time coming," he said after I explained the situation. "Your mother refused my help months ago when the foreclosure proceedings began. What can we do now? We have 3 days before they physically remove her." He steepled his fingers, considering. "Legally, not much. The house is lost, equity gone, credit destroyed. However, given your father's medical condition and your mother's apparent psychiatric issues, we might argue for a hardship extension to find appropriate housing. And if that fails, then you have 72 hours to find her somewhere to go." His expression softened slightly. "Amber, I feel obligated to point out that this isn't actually your responsibility. You're not legally required to house your mother." The statement, though true, felt impossible. I can't just leave her homeless. Many adult children would, given what you've described about your relationship. I left his office with referrals to emergency housing services and elder care organizations, but no real solutions. On the drive back to the house, I called Marcus to cancel our dinner plans, explaining the situation in exhausted fragments. "What can I do?" he asked immediately. "Do you need help packing? A truck? A place for your mom to stay?" His unhesitating offer of support brought tears to my eyes. "Just knowing you're there helps," I said. "I'll call when I know more." The next 36 hours passed in a blur of activity. Allison and I worked in grim tandem, sorting through 30 years of accumulated possessions, deciding what to save and what to leave behind. Mom alternated between periods of foggy cooperation and episodes of blame-filled rage. "This is your fault," she hissed during one particularly difficult moment as I packed her clothing. "If you hadn't abandoned us, we wouldn't be in this mess." "Mom, you threw me out," I reminded her, keeping my voice steady. "After I gave you my savings." "You were supposed to fix everything," she shouted, knocking a stack of folded sweaters to the floor. "That's what you do. You fix things." Later, during a calmer moment, she stared at a family photo I was wrapping in newspaper. "Where did it all go wrong?" she asked, sounding genuinely confused. "I think it's been wrong for a long time," I answered honestly. "We just didn't want to see it." On the second day, I drove to Massachusetts General to visit Dad. He looked alarmingly frail in the hospital bed, connected to monitors and 4 lines. "I'm so sorry," he said, gripping my hand weakly. "I never should have asked you to go back there." "It's good that you did," I assured him. "Mom needs serious help." She might have been in that house alone when the sheriff came. We discussed options. Dad's condition required ongoing medical care he couldn't afford in Florida. The retirement community had terminated his lease after his extended absence. With no income beyond Social Security and a small pension, his choices were limited. "There's a Veterans Assistance Program," I explained, showing him the pamphlets I'd collected. "Since you served in the Navy, you qualify for subsidized housing with medical support." He studied the materials, then looked up at me with eyes that had aged decades in months. "I failed you girls," he said simply. "I knew Catherine had problems. But it was easier to leave than deal with them." "We all made choices," I said, surprising myself with the lack of recrimination in my voice. "Now we're making different ones." By the third day, eviction day, we had cobbled together temporary solutions. Mom would stay with her sister in Rhode Island until a spot opened in an assisted living facility that accepted her limited insurance. Dad would transition to a VA medical housing unit after discharge from the hospital. Allison and I would store family photos and important documents in my storage unit, with the rest of the salvageable possessions going to Allison's friend's garage. As 9 a.m. approached, we sat in the nearly empty living room, waiting for the sheriff. Mom seemed to have aged a decade in 3 days, her face hollow with the reality of losing her home. "I gambled it all away," she said suddenly, breaking the heavy silence. "Your rent money, James's support payments, even Allison's tuition refund." I kept thinking one big win would fix everything. Allison and I exchanged glances, this admission confirming what we'd already pieced together. "How long?" I asked. "Years. Since before the divorce." She stared at her hands. "I always thought I could stop anytime. But then I'd lose again, and the only way to get it back was to bet more." The sheriff arrived precisely at 9, accompanied by a bank representative and 2 movers. Despite our preparations, the reality of being escorted from the house was humiliating and painful. Mom had to be practically carried to the car, collapsing into tears as the door closed on 30 years of memories. As our sad caravan pulled away, me driving Mom to Rhode Island, Allison following with the last of the boxed possessions, I caught a final glimpse of the house in my rearview mirror. The "For Sale, Bank-Owned" sign already stood in the overgrown lawn, erasing our family's presence before we'd even left the street. 1 year after the eviction, I stood in my new apartment, a real 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor of a well-maintained building in Cambridge, with large windows that flooded the space with natural light. At 28, I finally had a home that was truly mine, secured with a lease bearing only my name. The journey to this moment had been far from linear. After delivering Mom to her sister's house in Rhode Island, I had returned to my basement room exhausted but resolute. The crisis had forced a reckoning that might otherwise have taken years. My promotion at the accounting firm had come through, along with the raise that made this apartment possible. The certification courses were complete, my degree program progressing one evening class at a time. My emergency fund, while modest, was growing again. More important than these tangible achievements were the less visible ones. Therapy with Dr. Thompson had helped me recognize and dismantle the unhealthy patterns I'd carried from childhood, the excessive responsibility, the need for validation, the belief that love must be earned through sacrifice. Boundaries aren't selfish, she had reminded me during a particularly difficult session after the eviction. They're necessary for healthy relationships. I had put this wisdom into practice, maintaining limited but regular contact with my parents while refusing to be drawn into their ongoing dramas. Mom had eventually entered treatment for gambling addiction as a condition of her sister's continued support. Dad had settled into the veterans facility, his health stabilizing under consistent medical care. Allison and I had rebuilt our relationship slowly, acknowledging the ways we'd been pitted against each other and committing to a different dynamic moving forward. She had re-enrolled in community college, studying social work with a new sense of purpose born from our family's collapse. I want to help people recognize destructive patterns before they lose everything, she had explained over coffee during one of our monthly meetups. Like we wish someone had done for us. My relationship with Marcus had deepened into something I'd never experienced before, a partnership of equals built on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than need or obligation. He had been my rock during the family crisis, offering practical help without taking over, supporting without enabling. Today, friends would be arriving soon to celebrate my apartment warming. Rachel and Brad, expecting their first child. Jessica and Michael from my expanding social circle. Marcus, who now spent most nights here but maintained his own apartment out of respect for my need for independence. Allison, bringing her new boyfriend whom I'd yet to meet. As I arranged a tray of cheese and fruit, a far cry from the ramen noodles that had sustained me in the basement days, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Congratulations on your new place. Dad told me about it. Can we talk sometime? Catherine. My mother, reaching out directly for the first time in months rather than through intermediaries. I set the phone down without responding immediately, refusing to let it disrupt my hard-won peace. I would answer tomorrow, setting clear parameters for any potential conversation. The doorbell rang, and I welcomed Rachel and Brad with genuine joy, accepting their housewarming gift, a beautiful potted peace lily for my sunny windowsill. This place is amazing, Rachel marveled. Taking in the modest but comfortable furnishings, the artwork I'd carefully selected, the overall sense of calm the space projected. It feels like you, Brad added. And I understood exactly what he meant. Not an extension of someone else's home, not a temporary shelter, but a true reflection of the person I had become. As more friends arrived, filling my apartment with laughter and conversation, I found myself watching from the kitchen doorway. Momentarily overwhelmed by the contrast between this moment and where I'd been a year ago, standing in the rain with garbage bags of possessions, betrayed by the people who should have loved me most. Marcus appeared beside me, gently bumping my shoulder with his. You okay? You looked far away for a minute there. Just thinking about how much has changed, I said, leaning into his solid presence. A year ago, I couldn't imagine ever feeling this settled. You built this, he reminded me. All of it. No one gave it to you. He was right. Every element of my current life, this apartment, my career progression, these friendships, my improving relationship with Allison. Even the boundaries with my parents, I had constructed deliberately, often painfully, from the ashes of what had been destroyed. The doorbell rang again, and I opened it to find Allison with her boyfriend, a kind-faced man named David who worked as a physical therapist. They brought cupcakes from my favorite bakery and a small wrapped package. Open it now, Allison urged after introductions were made. Inside was a simple wooden frame containing a photograph I'd never seen before, Allison and me as very young children. Maybe 4 and 8, sitting on a park swing, genuinely laughing together before the competition and resentment took root. I found it when I was going through the boxes from the house. She explained. Thought you should have it. Thank you, I whispered, unexpectedly moved by this glimpse of what might have been, what might still be, in a different form. Later, as my guests mingled and chatted, I stepped onto my small balcony for a moment alone. The spring evening was mild, the street below alive with activity. From this height, I could see over the neighboring buildings to where the city skyline rose against the darkening sky. The journey wasn't over, of course. Financial recovery would take years. Trust issues remained a work in progress. The complicated relationships with my parents would require ongoing navigation. But standing there, I felt something I recognized as peace, not the temporary absence of conflict, but the deeper settledness that comes from knowing your own worth. The betrayal that had seemed like an ending had actually been a beginning. Being told your job is done had freed me to discover who I was beyond the role of family caretaker. Being thrown out had led me home to myself. I returned to the party, to the community I'd built, carrying this understanding like a talisman. The next chapter was unwritten. The possibilities open in ways they had never been when I was defined by others' needs and expectations. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a betrayal? What helped you move forward? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that even the deepest wounds can become doorways to a better life. Thank you for being here with me today. And remember, sometimes the family you choose is more valuable than the one you were born into.